Should my worship team be running tracks?
Tracks. Oh, tracks. Bands have been running tracks for a long time. Long before the church world ever figured it out.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
You mean audio, like production stuff, happened outside of church at one point?
Prior to the last 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before any big church was ever using them. No. We joke because we've been doing audio production for a long time, and we did not start in the church.
No.
And you get into the church world, and they're always asking you these questions where you're like, you really think this started in the church, don't you? So I think of bands like U2 who have been running backtracks for probably a long time, you know? And originally, I feel like, I've never researched this, so I feel like the idea was if you had elements that you just didn't want to try to create live, or I think in a lot of cases, tracks were probably brought on the road because tours were tight on money. And they could only afford to take one or two guitarists on the road, but their albums had 5 guitar parts that they just didn't want to compromise. I think of another popular act like Coldplay. They've been using tracks forever because they've loved having those orchestral sounds and symphonic elements and all kinds of stuff in their show.
Yeah.
So tracks are not a new thing by any means, but I would say the big shift I've seen in the church world is no longer are churches using tracks to supplement, but they're literally replacing half their band with tracks.
Ah.
And I think that's where things can get a little dicey.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Because nowadays there's enough services online where you can literally pull the stems from some big worship band's recording session and play with them and mix them live. You can multi-channel out, like a lot of cool stuff. And I'm not inherently against that, but I guess I have a couple pet peeves with tracks, maybe is a better way of putting it. I think they can be implemented well. I mean, you have to talk about the basic stuff like, can your band play to a click track, or do you even have in-ears? Because if you don't, I mean, you should probably just stop the discussion there.
Yeah.
But let's say you've got all the infrastructure in place. One of my pet peeves is most churches are doing music from a bunch of really big worship bands, not just one. And they pull the stems from these wildly different recording sessions, you know, that were recorded halfway across the world from each other with different bands and different mics. And we pipe them all into our sound system and expect them all to sound the same.
Yeah.
They're not. So that can be tricky, especially if you try to use like the drum tracks. I remember when we were first messing around with tracks at a church I was leading at, and for fun, one Sunday I didn't have a drummer. I tried to use the tracks drums.
And then you had a guy playing air drums in the back, like set him in the.
I just put my 6-year-old back there.
Yeah.
So it worked fine because we were, you know, we're good musicians. We could handle it, but like all 4 songs had a different drum set.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And it just like, it's like in the theater world where they talk about breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
When you use tracks, sometimes it breaks the fourth wall.
Sure.
Like all 4 drum sets were completely different. And whether you're, you know, using acoustic drums or electronic drums in your church, that sound stays consistent throughout the entire service. But when you're using tracks or bass tones are usually wildly different.
Yeah. Or when there's a big violin part, but there's no violin player on stage.
It's interesting.
It could turn into karaoke kind of fast, depending on the situation.
You know, and we did another episode of Tech Talks where we talked about, do I even need a full band? And this kind of plays into that too. Like,
sure,
if you gave me the choice, like a lot of worship bands will be like, all right, our bass player's not going to be here this week. We already run tracks every Sunday.
Yeah.
Let's just run the bass part from tracks.
Yeah.
That's a viable solution.
Sure.
I'm not inherently against that. But I always love to look at those situations like, what could we try different this week? Oh, we don't have a bass player this week. Why don't we just change it up and do an acoustic set?
Yeah.
Or try something different. On the flip side, one time I did a Christmas service where it was just me and I think another singer and maybe a piano player. But we were running some tracks that had some really cool elements in them, like some alternative percussion and mandolin and things. And it worked really good.
Hmm.
So I think, like anything in the church,
like every response we have to any of these,
it's all about how you execute it.
Yeah.
And never use tracks to be an excuse for not having a good music team. And what we mean by that, I don't want people to ever assume we're being all judgy and high and mighty or anything. What I mean by that is we talk about, we both used to work in guitar stores, and people would walk in and be like, "Hey, is this $5,000 guitar going to make me play better?" I'm like, honestly, no.
No, but lessons might.
Right. What if you spent $5,000 on music lessons?
Yeah.
I mean,
imagine the sounds you could pull out of your Squire.
It's not always so black and white or cut and dry, but like, if you're using tracks as an excuse for your band not to practice and become better musicians, then maybe it's a problem. If you're using them to supplement or to add things to it that you feel like add value to your sound, that's cool. But I mean, like, it can get excessive. We've done sound at a church where literally one whole page of their digital mixer was just tracks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that happens all the time.
When you're mixing that, don't you feel like walked in a corner?
It's a little weird. Yeah, it's a little weird.
Not to mention, when you use track, then you're locked into click track and guide track, and sometimes it can kind of kill the whole vibe. Like,
although it is fun when it's in Spanish.
Yeah, we played a gig one time where the music director thought it'd be awesome to give us clicks and cues in Spanish.
Yeah, and we left them in there for fun.
Yeah,
and it was interesting. There were a few moments live that I really wasn't sure what the person was saying.
I had figured some of them out, and then the other ones we
made it up.
But that's what you do. That's kind of the point I was trying to make, is like, so much of what I think makes the worship environment fun and engaging, and I don't know, you could use words like spiritual or whatever, but is the like nature of it evolving.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like tracks they lock us into the form, and they say you have to do the verse here, and call me old school. I'm a little more of a free flowy kind of guy, but
yeah. So to sum it up, it really just depends on what you're doing. Like, I don't think that there's definitely not a one answer, one size fits all.
Yeah.
It really depends on all the factors involved.
But I would say you don't have to run tracks.
No, you don't.
By all means, you don't have to.